Abhi?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We can start.
Yeah. Good evening, all of you.
Good evening, sir.
This is the fourth webinar in the Thursday webinar series from IEEE Malabar subsection. So today we have an eminent speaker from Central University of Kerala, Professor Amrit G. Kumar. He is going to talk on a very important and very relevant topic, that is teaching and learning in the post-COVID era. So now everyone is getting familiar with the online platforms. Now the whole education learning has been already shifted to the online media or online platform. So I hope this will be a very fruitful and wonderful session, and all of you will get benefited by this particular webinar. So this webinar will be anchored by Ms. Najda VM of NIT Calicut. Dr. Sabik PV is also there. So over to Najda for moderating as well as anchoring this webinar. Thank you.
Good evening all. I hope I am audible.
Yeah, you are audible.
Good evening all and welcome to the fourth webinar of Thursday webinar series organized by IEEE Malabar subsection. We have an eminent speaker here for handling today's session on teaching and learning in post-COVID era. I welcome you, sir, for this webinar. He had his graduation and post-graduation in economics, B.Ed in social science, M.Ed, PhD and postdoc in education. He started his career as primary school teacher in 1999 after his B.Ed and developed his career through various training colleges. He was appointed as the assistant professor in School of Education of Pondicherry University in 2009. He was awarded with Certificate of Merit for teaching based on students' assessment for 5 times consequently during his tenure there. Presently, he is the project head of PMMM National Mission on Teachers and Teaching School of Education at Central University of Kerala, Kasaragod, a prestigious project of MHRD, Government of India. This project is mainly intended to empower teachers working at various levels. Dr. Amrit is the research awardee of UGC, New Delhi. His scholarly interests include critical theory in education, neoliberal policies in education, and policy analysis in education. Dr. Amrit critically probes into the influence of neoliberal policies in shaping this psyche of stakeholders of education. Exploring the ramification of neoliberal economy, Dr. Amrit attempts to build up a broad framework for pedagogic interference to empower the teachers and students. He prefers to combine quantitative and qualitative approaches in his research. He draws a lot from poetry, literature, and philosophy in his teaching and research. He has several research papers in national and international journals and has 4 books to his credit. I welcome you, sir, to handle today's session.
Thank you, Dr. Najila. Is it true to my session? Can I start now, or is there anything else which is?
Yes, sir. You can start your session.
Oh, okay. Oh. So thank you, Dr. Najida, Dr. Sadiq, Dr. Taslima, my colleague, and all the distinguished members of IEEE Malabar subsection. In fact, it's a great privilege for me to be with you, the engineers of our generation, of our country. It's a great privilege indeed, because wherever we go, we see engineers, the presence of engineers, in a kind of what is being said in Ishavasya Upanishad, Ishavasya Idam Sarvam, Yatkinja Jagatyam Jagat, in a way that wherever you go, or the meaning of it is wherever you go, the God is there. And the meaning of I would like to just use the same kind of verses here. Wherever we go, we could see the presence of an engineer or the engineering in our modern society. I'm sitting on a chair which has been engineered. I'm using a table. I'm using a mobile phone. I'm under the roof of a big building, which is again been engineered. When I step out to the building, I just step onto the road, which is again been engineered, and almost everything is been engineered in a modern world. So I have great respect for the engineers because they engineer the world for us, and we all, especially people like me, who work in the area of social sciences, are being the beneficiaries of the great contributions which are being made by the engineers. In a way, the whole world is being engineered by the great power. That's what we believe. So engineering is a great kind of an activity, I do believe. In that way, I respect all the engineers because engineers are the creators. They create and they sustain the world, the modern world. So in a way, I would place engineers in a modern society next to the God, because engineers has a great deal to do with in our modern society. And as you said, we are banked with a particular kind of a pandemic or a kind of a shock that we have come across. This could be a COVID shock, a kind of a shock that we would call it as COVID shock. So far we have never been encountered with a kind of a shock like this. In a way, it's very important how do we respond to this particular shock. Every individual, how do we respond to this particular shock? A unskilled man, a coolie labor, a housewife, an old lady, an old granny, a very young engineer, a doctor, and a teacher, of course, and even a small boy or a small girl, an infant, all are being affected by the impact and influence of this particular COVID shock. And I would say that COVID has brought us the future quite close to us, or I would say that we have seen in teaching and learning, we have seen a premature arrival of future. Future has arrived in a premature way. That's what I would say. Not only in teaching, almost across the professions or across the life, we can see that the future has came, which was supposed to be there almost some 20, 30 or 50 years ago. We are facing a future which was supposed to be here around some 20 or 30 years before, because we were sure that everything is going to be digitalized in the coming future, or maybe in a decade or two. But that 1 or 2 decade has been bypassed by the 60 days or 70 days impact of COVID. We all have shifted to the digital technology. The teachers started teaching in digital tools. Students started receiving knowledge through the digital tools, and teachers started addressing individually under the impression that he is addressing masses, or maybe 50s or 30s or 60s of students. So speaking individually will become speaking to a group. So many changes are coming across in our society, especially in teaching. I would like to specifically connect my speech to the profession of engineers, because that makes a little more sense. Of course, I basically work in the field of pedagogy, and I specialize in the area where I used to write and then speak about how this technology has created an impact on education. This is an important area. In what way the learning of a learner is being changed and influenced or being swayed by the changes which is happening in the field of technology. So the basic question is whether technology changes education or education changes technology. This is a very important question. So when I spread across this question to the whole section of the society in a general way, the basic question is whether the society is being shaped by technology, or the technology is being shaped by the society? This is a very important question that all the engineers, not only the engineers, almost everyone has to ask oneself. So this question has its repercussion in teaching as well, because the same question is being asked whether it is technology shaped teaching or teaching shaped technology. Or the teacher demands the technologies that I need this, so give me this. Or the technologist gives something and says, teacher, this is here, you do with this. So this is the basic question. When we cut across this question for the whole society, the question goes like this: whether society is being shaped by technology or the technology is being shaped by the society. This is the basic question that I am going to discuss on today's lecture. And we know that a modern discipline has formed. So sorry. A modern discipline has been formed in this particular area, which has been called as science and technology studies. Science and technology studies. Science and technology studies, which discuss about how science and technology and society interact with each other, and what are the dynamics of science and technology interactions influencing each other. So I would basically say that I would very basically believe in an argument that science and technology are basically a social phenomenon. And because if a sociologist is studying about the social relationships, social structure, social dynamics, and a sociologist in a modern day is being indebted, or in a way he's been become liable to study the changes in technology, because these changes in technology, of course, influence back the social structure as well. Because what we see in our modern society is that society and its structure, society and its social relationships, and the whole process of socialization is being highly swayed by the technological changes. So in a way, we can see that all the technologists is a sociologist as well, or a social scientist as well. We can see that science and technology are basically a social phenomenon. That's what I would like to hang upon in the whole lecture. Basically, we can see that technology influences the social structure. Basically, the society structure means based on the economic structure: poor people, average people, upper middle class, upper middle class, lower class, and the elite group. And all these groups are being demarcated or being classified on the base of the technological facilities which are being owned by them. To a great extent, these technological differences between these different groups varies or maybe classify the whole society and the social structure into various stratas, basically. Now, we know that, a person who is in an upper social structure uses an Apple mobile phone. A person who is at the lower social structure may be using an ordinary mobile phone, maybe something without a social, and maybe without a smartphone facility, or maybe without a screen touch facility, something of that sort. And, we can know that technology has shaped our modern life drastically, influenced drastically. I'll tell you the basic example of a technology. During the 14th century, as we all know, it was the period of, rampant growth of science and technology, the Enlightenment, all this kind of changes. We know that 14th century, the shipbuilding technology has captured a lot of momentum. And as a result, we know the shipbuilding technology has grown drastically. Shipbuilding technology. Bigger ships were started being made. Say, for example, earlier small boats were there, which was being used for fishing. Then people and the scientists of Europe has discovered that big ships can be made with which can transport more than 100 people, 500 people, or 1,000 people. That is a big invention, actually. A big ship can be developed with 1,000 and 100 people. And also it was been identified that, or been discovered that an ordinary boat can travel is of maybe, for example, maybe 10 kilometers a day, or I'm not sure, maybe some 20 kilometers a day. And these big ships were being able to, by using the wind and other technologies, and these big ships are being able to transport across continents. That's big discovery at that point of time in 14th century. You should remember it was 1400s, 14th century. And you know what happened when these small boats, from these small boats, evolution of the big ships have come up. What happened basically is that, you know, these people in the Europe, especially in the Portuguese, in the British, in the French people, when they were being identified with this, influenced by this big ship technology, they have identified that this ship can be used for improving the social life in a way that they started moving across the continents. That's how the Vasco da Gama reached Kapat. And then in 15th century, Vasco da Gama reached Kapat. And as a result, you know, what we have seen is that maybe in his first visit, he was a very, very, very decent gentleman. And maybe in the next visit, he was not like that. He came with some kind of soldiers. And, you know, what we have understood is that ship technology, which was being used for fishing, or boat technology, which was used for fishing, transportation. And we identified in future that the place where a fish net can be placed can also be used for keeping a pistol, or maybe a big, maybe a barrel for firing. So when we identified this, what happened? The ship technology of the 14th century changed the social structure of Europe, and at the same time, it changed the social structure of the colonies where this ship technology was influenced. In Indian continent, we know that our social structure was changed. Till that time, the kings were ruling, these local landlords were there. All those things have changed. As a result, what we have seen is a modern British empire has emerged. And in Mahi, we have seen that French empire has emerged. And then in Goa, Portuguese people have established their kingdom. So what happened, what I wanted to say is that technology has influenced the social structure, the very social structure of our life. And technology has sometimes even oppressed the people. For a group of people, it was oppression. For a group of people, it was a great profit actually. For the European people, it was a great profit, when it was a great oppression for the people who are in Kapat, for the people who are in the whole subcontinent. So what we used to see is that technology has been a great force that influences the social structure. So when we talk about this, technology which has influenced in antiquity, we should understand that the technology that each one of you produce, or you are being part with, or you are been associated with, also is making silent changes in our social structure. And every technologist has a very, very important social responsibility of understanding and penetrating into how the system in which I am associated with, or the construction work, or maybe the technology work, or the IT work, or the software, or maybe the teaching of technology, whatsoever it be, what is the professional associate, whatever be my professional association, how my work and my deeds and my actions, my publications and my actions are going to influence the social structure. And because the most important issue that we face is that we are not able to apparently, or maybe able to observe obvious changes in the society about our own work, but almost all the work or the influences of our work in society, of an engineer's work in society, is tacit, or is in a way it's hidden actually. Basically, it's hidden. Or maybe I would say that what is most obvious in our society is the most hidden thing. We never understand what is really its influence. Basically, I can tell you an example. When we see a fish, when we think about a fish, I request all of you to think about a fish. You will never think that fish is always wet. We think some aspects of fish. But what is the most obvious truth is that fish is always wet. But most obvious truth will come to our mind only at the last time when somebody reminds us about it. So what I wanted to argue is that the most obvious truth is the most hidden truth in our society. So the most obvious influence that you exert, that you influence upon the society, has become the most hidden influence upon the society, and every engineer and every technologist has a very basic responsibility of understanding how your deeds and how your actions, how your work, how your publication, how your teaching is going to influence the modern society. So I would say that, I would argue that technology has become a major source of influence upon society. Earlier it was religion, we would say. Religion was a great influence upon the social structure. We say that religious practices have influenced the social life, and caste has influenced the social life, and political system has influenced the social life. I would place technology next to it, or even beyond all this. Now I would say that technology is even beyond. All these religions are now using technology. So while bringing in the great changes as part of enlightenment, the Galileo Galilei, who kickstarted, who kindled the whole enlightenment movement, the whole people believed that this enlightenment and the the scientific revolution is going to abandon religion, actually, because religion is full of superstitious, and then you bring in scientific revolution, scientific way of thinking. When you look at the religion through scientific spectrum, scientific specs and scientific glass, religion is absurdity in that way, because it never goes with rational thinking. Religion is absolutely different kind of thinking. But we all believe that religion is going to be abandoned by science. But that's what the major expectation of the people at that particular time, because scientific thinking and rational thinking will suspend religion and caste and everything, all this kind of thing, so that people all will come into a rational way of thinking. But what happened in the future? Nothing had happened, actually. And science has become, and technology has become another religion now. That is the total impact that we have seen. So what I would like to argue is that technology, to a great extent, is what is happening in our society, is creating a kind of a rationality, which I would borrow the usage of a great thinker whose name is Marcuse. Marcuse was a great German thinker, great scholar. Marcuse has written a beautiful book, which is the title of the book is One Dimensional Man, in which he has argued that a new technological rationality is coming up. Instead of rationality, the ordinary rationality that we talk about, a new technological rationality is coming up. And this new technological rationality is creating new needs to the human being. And these new needs are, according to Marcuse, is a kind of false needs. They are not real needs, they are false needs. They are the needs which are artificially made. So that is a technological rationality, is creating false needs among all of us. Say, for example, I would argue that we will all know that phone is being used for communication. A telephone is being, or a mobile phone is being used for communication. So when mobile phone has become used for, the basic purpose of mobile phone is to communicate between two people, or sometimes send communications through email, or maybe WhatsApp, or maybe through Facebook, or maybe Instagram, whatever it be. But now this has not become no more the only use of technology, but instead the same technological rationality has created another need. If you have a need, you should need this much inch screen. You should have an Apple phone. You should have a big smartphone. You should have this much 38 GB storage capacity. And all these kind of new needs are coming up. So what we see is that in addition to the existing needs, the technological rationality is adding up newer and newer needs. I just remember one of my experience when I was a novice in the field of teaching. I started getting a little salary as a guest faculty in an institution. Then I wanted to communicate transport between my home and this particular institution. It was around some 20 kilometers, 25 kilometers distance were there, or 20 kilometers distance were there hardly. People do advise me, instead of coming on bus every day, you get a bike. I also feel it's quite a rational kind of a thing to get a bike to travel 20 kilometers every day. When I started thinking about sharing my thought about buying or purchasing a bike, people started arguing. Maybe Taslima may be knowing my height. I'm 6 feet. And people said, Amrit, if you buy a bike, it should be a bullet. So my basic purpose of transportation has been getting mutated. with a social pressure or maybe a new technological pressure, and people started saying, if you go for an Enfield or a Bullet, you will have these facilities, you will have these facilities, your appearance will be more wonderful. You know, all these kind of things have come up. So I am just being bombarded with a bundle of false leads, and I was just confused what kind of transportation technology I should try with. This is a big issue that technology places us with a lot of enormous false leads, which we are all being succumbed to basically. So the basic question is that why do we bring up science and technology? What is the purpose of science and technology that the engineers are engaged with? I would argue that the basic purpose of science and technology is to bring in a beautiful society. A beautiful society. That's the basic purpose of. That's the basic purpose of education. Why do we spend a large amount of money for education? Why do we spend, government engineering college students? Every student is being spent with nearly more than lakhs of rupees every year, including the salary of the teachers, building, maintenance, and everything. Why do we spend all this money? The basic purpose is that by spending this money, public money, these people will contribute to a better society, a better, beautiful society, equal society. But if this equal society is the dream of technology, we have to think seriously about whether our technological rationality is putting forward the real needs or the false needs. It's an important. So technology should reach to a level to an ordinary man so that you are able to understand the needs of the ordinary man so that you can support the ordinary man to come up with. That's what is called as social construction of technology. I would like to place this particular new terminology as social construction of technology. So technology is basically a social construction. I will give you an argument because all kinds of technology must be a social construction or is a social construction. Whether it is a right construction, wrong construction, high construction, fall, low, these are all different kind of initiatives. Technology is social construction. Social construction of technology should happen. Almost everything is social construction. I will give you a very solid example. Yuval Noah Harari argues that one of the important theory of language is that language has been formed, say, for example, the foraging society millions of years before, then we are all, very savage people, no culture, no civilization, nothing of that sort. Human being is basically a social animal. So what he did, he will join some 10, 15 people together. If it is more than that, fight will start. Inside, politics will start. So that one leader with 50 people was maximum. If more than that, another leader will come up. So politics will start up. As a result, group will separate. So maximum 30 to 50 people were being guided, led by a single person. And even within that single group, what happened? There are men and women. And as a result, what happened? These men and women wanted to know whether this particular lady is being more close with that particular man, and whether this man and that man has a politics in between. So we all wanted to know how these interactions are going on. So a basic theory about language is that language has emerged as the basic purpose of knowing the internal politics of a particular group. That means the basic origin of every language is for gossiping. I wanted to know whether she is with him every day or every night, or whether I wanted to know whether he, when he share the food, he give little extra to this particular lady, or whether when he share this food, say for example, we hunt basically a buffalo or wild buffalo. I wanted to know whether he is sharing little extra for this particular person, this particular lady, and then maybe different kinds of aspects like this. So people wanted to know the internal politics as a result language was developed. This is an important theory. So, anybody want to say something? Okay. So, this is an important theory about language. So, gossiping, language for gossiping. So, in that way, language was a social construction. Language is a social product. Similarly, we know technology also is a social product. Say, for example, when we were in a group, foraging group, hunting, foraging group, we were jumping on the wild animals and then succumbing it, surrendering it. It was so difficult. Jumping on a buffalo is difficult. So then the earliest engineers, the first and earliest engineers, what did they do? They started sharpening the tool. As a result, they made stone tools, sharp stone tools. They were the first engineers. They made fire for cooking. They were the engineers. So newer and newer technologies, and they started creating traps for the animal. So they were the engineers, earliest engineers. When we look at the industrial society, if you look at the great works of Alvin Toffler, that the industrial society, every industrial society, there was a filing system, file system. We know even now filing system is there. Alvin Toffler says that when in a study in US during 1960s or 70s or so, when a person's one staff in a company or in a government staff, in a permanent staff, when his personal file was taken, a person with 5 years of service, almost 5 years of service, has more than 8,000 papers in his file. That includes his joining letter, appointment order, his leave letter, his circular, and all this together, 7,000 papers. And this storing this paper is a big issue for the industrial society. How much paper we will accumulate with a single person, for a single person? And Alvin Toffler argues in 1970s or so, we will certainly bring in a system, mankind will bring in certainly a system which will overcome this paper blizzard. Paper was everything at a point of time, paper. What is the evidence that you are the husband of your wife? It's a paper, marriage certificate. Your wife will say, this is my husband, but court will not accept it. You go to the court and argue that this is my husband. Court will show your certificate. And you argue that this is my son, this is my daughter. A court will say, produce a certificate. Or maybe you go for a testing, and then the result will be produced in a piece of paper, and that paper will be the evidence. So this paper blizzard, everything we are making in a paper, we will overcome this paper. Alvin Toffler predicted. And what we see is that we are moving towards a paperless society. So when society needs certain needs, society's technologies, people like you will make newer and newer technologies. So we come up with software, we come up with emails, we come up with internet and all this kind of thing. Gradually we are moving towards a paperless society. Now a writer, say for example, a writer, novelist, or a social critic rarely use paper. They directly write into the mobile phone, or maybe they write into their laptop. Nobody uses paper now. A professional writer, novelist, or maybe whoever never uses a paper. So they use So society creates technology. So social needs create technology. That's what basically. Similarly, at a particular point of time, we were in need of a particular kind of a device which can kill 1 lakh people at a point of time. So we devised a bomb. So bomb is basically a political construction. International relations needs bombs. So we argue that atom bomb is a construction of technology. No, atom bomb is basically a social construction. It was a politician who was devised. Maybe it was because of the influence of a politician that technologists believe, has been forced to think that, you may like a kind of a material which can kill 1 lakh people at a time, which can destroy a big city like Hiroshima or Nagasaki. So, okay, that's a good idea. Then think of that kind of substance. We brought out bomb. So bomb, beyond technological construction or engineering, is a social construction basically. But what happens when this technology goes above and creates a kind of technological rationality? We have seen a kind of a particular situation where technology started creating a new kind of a society, impacting the society in a way that technology has deep influences in the social structures of the society. So this is the current system that we face today in teaching that we see. Say, for example, you all know that we have started our teaching practices in higher education institutions through Zoom or Google Meet or maybe Microsoft Teams or something like that. When technology decides that this should be the mode of education, or we started going through MOOCs, massive open online courses. And the new budget has brought a new kind of program which is called as MOOC, Massive Online Open Program. So the whole program is through online, not only a course. Now the whole program is going to be through online. So civil engineering can be given through MOOC, or maybe MA history can be given through massive open online program. So once upon a day, the whole systems can be suspended and a new kind of online system can be generated. So possibilities are not far away. So this, what we see is technology changes the social system. Our social system was a regular kind of a school, college system. And people do interact with each other. A teacher knows the student, not in a part, but in full, the full human being. Students know the teacher fully, and the teacher knows the students fully, not partly, not the only picture or maybe not only part of their learning. So what happened? Technology, after a particular point of time, has crossed the border of social construction, and technology has created in the bombarding of technological innovation. That's what the point is. In a particular point of time that we see, a technological boom has happened. In this point of technological boom, what happened as a result? Technology started increasing the production. Total products has been increased due to technological advancement. Say, for example, I was able to produce 1 bottle of milk per day with my ordinary chemical capacities and all. When technology came up, I am able to produce 1 lakh bottle of 1 lakh bottle of ink in a day in a factory. So what is my next purpose? I have to sell all this ink bottles. So then I have to create an artificial demand for the ink bottle. So then I will create a market technology for that. When I create a market technology, social structure also will influence. New kind of employment will come up. New kind of influences will come. New kind of targets will come up. So every individual will be given with a particular target. So new targets will come up. This target will influence his family relationship sometimes. His target is 10 and he could not achieve 10 and he has achieved only 8. So that influence sometimes his family relationship. As a result, technology has become a basic reason for influencing the social, human and family relationship. That is the point where a techno-social intervention is needed. Techno-social intervention is needed. And this intervention is needed in education as well. And that's what my strong belief is basically. A techno-social intervention is needed. That has happened across the society. Then that means society, when technology goes above a particular kind of limit and techno-rationality started creating bombarding of false needs to the society, society will get it as a corrective force. As a corrective force. Earlier, you know what happened? Ford's theory, Ford, the first car company, he started big factory. And what was this? It has been later called as Fordism. What he reduced he started producing cars. When technology advancement comes up, his factory can produce 100 cars a day, but there is no consumers. What he did is, he said, I will produce car. You buy car in installment. So people started buying car in installment so that he need not stop his factory's production. And finally, he said his factory members, laborers, you also buy a car. I will give you some 10% discount for you because you are my factory laborers. So you buy a car. I will cut salary. I will cut from your salary. So every laborer who was an ordinary laborer who will never buy a car according to his ordinary income, his natural income, his income that he did, he also started buying a car. So as a result, what happened? An artificial car demand has become present in the society, visible in the society. Similarly, what happened? Then air pollution has become the result. And now what we see in Delhi has been closed for a few days because of, even before this COVID, due to pollution. Due to pollution. And when this particular level comes up, society will interfere. Will say the technologies, the technological rationality, stop it. You're producing over. And as a result, what we do, technologies are being corrected by a new battery car. renewable energy car. Or so, you know, how when this pollution has become an important issue, when pollution is an important issue, society interfere. When society interfere, techno correction happens. So society creates a techno correction. So this is a great phenomenon that often we keep unnoticed. That's what it's most obvious, but it's most hidden. Most obvious and most hidden. You know what happened in Ford company during 1960s and 70s? You know, they have created a car called as a brand, a segment of car which was called as Ford Pinto. Ford Pinto. And this Ford Pinto was one of the small car during 1960s and 70s. What happened? Ford Pinto car, its battery corporate, some kind. I'm not a technocrat. I'm not a civil engineer, so automobile engineer. So there was some problem. So there was some explosion. It happened on more than, say for example, more than 10% of the cars which were sold. So a kind of an explosion happened. This has created a serious discussion in America, US. This Ford Pinto was only in US, I believe. A lot of discussion, a lot of protest. You know what happened? When it was inquiry happened, the company knows that this particular problem is there. But due to the pressure of the managerial system and due to the pressure of the overproduction, they were forced to hide this particular fact and they were forced to market it. Because technology has been producing, every day cars are coming up. So by knowing this error, they were forced to produce the car. So this is a serious controversy in US at that particular point of time. You know, we know that the cases of DDT. DDT was a kind of a powder which was used to kill the insects. Basically, this DDT was produced during the Second World War, 1940s, because these military people, when they were hiding in the bushes and the grasses in the open field, there was a lot of insects. Unexpected insects are there. So they used to bring in this kind of material, DDT. So they spread across and then they started firing and doing the kind of activity. And this particular DDT has become a common. So then they started producing it in a larger scale, small scale DDT, which was used only for the military people, producing in a large scale. As a result, you know what? Overproduction. Products are coming up. Large quantity of DDT is coming up. So we have popularized it. So DDT has come to Kerala in that way. When I was a small boy, DDT was an ordinary product, natural product, ordinary family member kind of a thing. Wherever there is an ant, people will powder DDT. Then later DDT was blocked, cancelled. Similar the case was endosulfan in Kasaragod, you know, endosulfan. And similar the case in the case of dam construction and all this, you know, wherever we go, we can see that, you know, this society is interfering in the technology and technology often correct itself for the social needs. We know cars were there quite common, cars were there. And then a lot of accidents were there. When a lot of accidents were there, we started thinking about airbags and then a particular kind of braking system. When we started thinking about a beautiful road, kind of a road where this new road technology has emerged, the accidents can be reduced. Earlier cycles were there, but people after the job, they wanted to go back to their home. Maybe job is over by around 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. They wanted to go back to their home. In the night, it's difficult to go with a cycle. Then society needed a kind of dynamo. Then dynamos were made. So, you know, every process, every step of the technological advancement, there is a social motivation. And whenever this technological rationality has crossed beyond a particular level, there is a techno correction, a social correction of technology. But unfortunately, in a modern society, what happens is that this technological rationality is being consumed by almost all the people, and this technological correction, rate of technological correction has reduced to a great extent. Rate of technological correction has reduced to a great extent. So we are under the kind of illusion of technological rationality. We believe that this technology is going to give us a beautiful society. We think that this online teaching is a kind of a great advancement. But online teaching sometimes the fascinated teacher is sometimes cutting a branch where he is sitting. Sometimes maybe tomorrow, after my lecture is recorded, you will say that tomorrow you are not needed because your course is already recorded. So whenever there is if you have a new course, you can come up with a new course. When we record that course also is recorded. Okay, this can be aired through maybe internet or something. So in a way, when we look at it, this rate of technological correction has reduced considerably, which is a matter of great, concern for the modern society, because we have to live in a society where our children is going to live. And when we are producing a kind of a technological rationality, I do not know what kind of a world our future society is going to live in. So being the engineers, every engineer should be a social scientist in that way. That's what my basic argument is basically. Every engineer should be a social engineer. So what is essential for that is basically, I think I will, maybe time is 15 past 6 now. I may stop maybe in some 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Is it all right? Is it all right? 5
Yeah,
minutes
sir,
to
you
10
can
minutes?
take another 5-10 minutes, no problem.
Sorry?
Sir, you can take another 5-10 minutes, no problem.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. So what we see is that every engineer should be a Democrat. That's what basic argument is. I wanted to share with you. Every engineer should be a Democrat as well, because if you wanted to make a make a new bridge, a new bridge, you know that you have wonderful civil engineering skills and you have all the materials. Next day you construct it. So what is going to be the social impact of a bridge maybe after 10 years or 15 years or something of that sort? Every engineer has to think a social dimension of this particular initiative that he is going to undertake, because when we say that technology brings in modernity, a basic thing that we should understand is that modernity is not a singular form. We have alternative modernities. Then we have many modernities basically. When we talk about beautiful roads, beautiful bridges, it's all modernity, isn't it? So technological modernity. But these beautiful roads and beautiful bridges are not acceptable in Venice. When I was in Italy, Rome, one of my friends, insisted me to go with him to the Venice, but the foolish me did not go because I said I have some work to do here. I did not go. And after coming back, when he showed the pictures of Venice, I was feeling like, I myself felt like I'm a moron because I have rejected his offer to go to Venice. It's such a beautiful kind of a city, kind of a place where people are moving in boats, like our Kuttanad, in that most of you might have read through the works of Tagali, Shivashankara Pillai. It's a beautiful place which I have missed. Is road a modernity in Venice? They will reject it. So when we say that road is a modernity, they will reject that modernity. So modernity in Venice is something different. So modernity in Kuttanad also is different, but unfortunately we are laying roads across Kuttanad now. Laying roads across Kuttanad. Wherever there is beautiful places, we are laying roads across. And modernity has to be defined according to the cultural, according to the social, according to the geographical, according to the different aspects which are prevailing in a particular area. That's very important. I'll stop here with this particular example of Paulo Freire, who was a famous Brazilian thinker, educationalist. When he was assigned to give literacy classes, adult literacy classes for the Portuguese migrants to Brazil during a flood, what he did is, what adult literacy for us is teach them ABCD or maybe Portuguese language, or maybe that is what our addition, subtraction, something of that sort, writing and all this. That's what literacy for us. But what Paulo Freire did is he went to these particular refugees, with flood-affected refugees. He started staying with them for a week and staying with them, asking them, what do you need? Suppose if I'm teaching you something, what do you need? Then they said, sir, please teach us something, how to overcome this flood, how to overcome this flood. And X person, so what do you need? I need to store my food. Maybe because 2 months we are suffering because of this flood. I want to store food. So needs were different, and then Paulo Freire were assigned to teach them ABCD and basic literacy measures, basic literacy skills. He decided that I will teach them how to overcome flood. That was literacy. So the flood technology, overcoming the flood, technology for overcoming flood has become the basic literacy for this group of people. So what my point basically is that every engineer has a responsibility to look deep into the social realities and thereby understand and to live with the people. So that's what we should, I think every engineer should think about this particular idea. Every engineer should be ethno-engineer. That means he live with the society where he is living, not with the technological, online system. New developments are coming in US, so we should adopt it. No, we should adopt the technology which is the need of the local society, and thereby every engineer has to become a ethno-engineer. Means we live with the local people and design and devise technologies which are needed for the local society. So with this, I close this. I think if there is anything more you wanted to discuss, I've been happy to respond to that. I thank the organizers of IEEE Malabar subsection. I Sadiq, Dr. Sadiq, Dr. Najida, Dr. Taslima, who contacted me, my colleague, all the distinguished participants, members of this particular program who were listening to me patiently. I'm so happy about it. So thank you all. I appreciate your motivation to organize such kind of programs and your patience to listen such kind of a person who is never a technologist or a technocrat, and giving space for a person like me to talk to you among great engineers. Like as I started with Isavasim Idam Sarvam Yatkinja Jagatyam Jagat, wherever I go, I see not only an engineer, but he's an engineer. Either you or your forefather engineers touch us, I can feel everywhere. I hope that you will all continue it with a great social sense of criticism and social sense. I thank all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for the nice talk. Now, if any participants have any queries, you could please raise your hand so that your microphone will be unmuted. There is a feedback form sent in the chat group. Please fill it.
So I think nobody is having any questions, I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Najida, you can wind up.
Questions. Thank you not for asking questions.
Okay.
Okay, let us conclude today's session by vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude on behalf of everybody to IEEE Malabar subsection for organizing this webinar series. Handling wide varieties of topics. Excuse me, am I audible?
It's audible only, but a little bit noise is coming. Just move mic little bit apart from your mouth.
Okay. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude towards IEEE Malabar section for organizing this webinar series, handling wide varieties of topics. We started today's session with talk by Dr. S.T. Madhukumar, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering Department and Dean of Students Welfare, NIT Calicut, and Chair of IEEE subsection. I express our sincere gratitude towards you, sir, for being the pillar of motivation for all organizing this event. We had a nice interaction with our eminent speaker, Dr. Amrut G. Kumar from Central University of Kerala, regarding teaching and learning in post-COVID era. The talk was focused on the thought if education or society has changed the technology or technology has changed the education or society. He has conveyed very well that how the society as well as the technology works as a feedback system so that both aid together. I would like to thank him on behalf of all the participants and IEEE Malabar subsection for delivering today's talk. Last but not the least, I would like to thank all worked behind this event to come to a reality. With this, I hope we could wind up the session. Please
Thank you,
make
sir.
sure that you fill the feedback form in the chat session.
Amrut sir, thank you, sir, for being with us and spending 1 hour with us.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.